Welcome to Serenity Fire, the podcast where wellness meets grit. I'm your host, Krista Guagenti, founder of Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique. Join me as we dive into the intriguing world of biohacking, clean living, cutting-edge spa trends, and the hustle, grind, and grit of entrepreneurship. From my personal battles with weight management, infertility, and a 30-year journey to create and launch my dream business, to building a sanctuary for those who have been touched by cancer, I'm here to share real talk, inspire big dreams, and spark a passion for holistic living inside each and every one of you. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Serenity Fire. In our last episode, we talked about bioidentical versus synthetic hormones. We covered everything from what those terms actually mean. We talked about progesterone versus progestins, and we discussed why many practitioners have become increasingly interested in therapies that more closely mirror human biology. Today, we're tackling the question that has influenced the hormone conversation probably more than any other, and that's cancer. Because for many people, the hormone discussion isn't really about hot flashes or sleep or energy or body composition. I mean, those things may have brought them to the conversation, but the real discussion is around fear. And much of that fear can be traced back to one single study that changed the healthcare decisions of millions of women. It unilaterally caused countless women to stop hormone therapy instantly, and it caused many physicians to stop prescribing hormone therapy altogether. And this study created fears that still exist more than 20 years later. But what if the headlines that people remember aren't actually the full story? I'm talking about one of the most influential studies in modern medicine, the Women's Health Initiative, also known as WHI. I mentioned this in some of my previous episodes, so it may sound familiar when I tell you that the study fundamentally changed the hormone conversation in dramatic ways, and it still resonates with so many people. So today, we're going to dive a little deeper into this study and get to the science behind it. But we're also going to talk about something equally important, what we've learned since this study was put out. Because if you've ever wondered, do hormones cause cancer? Is estrogen dangerous? Does progesterone increase breast cancer risk? Does testosterone increase cancer risk? Or is hormone therapy safe? If you've thought of any of those questions, then this episode is definitely for you. So let's dive in. When the WHI study was released in 2002, the headlines were literally everywhere, and they were frightening. And as I mentioned, millions of women stopped taking hormones, and many physicians stopped prescribing them. And hormone therapy quickly went from being widely used to widely feared. For many people, the takeaway was simple. Hormones cause breast cancer. Hormones cause heart disease. Hormones are dangerous. Hormones cause blood clots. But here's the problem. Most people never really actually read the full study. They only heard the headlines, and the headlines left out a tremendous amount of context. One of the first details that's important to understand about this study is that the average age of the women studied was approximately 63 years old. So think about that. That means that those participants were more than a decade beyond menopause before hormone therapy was even initiated. And that's very different from a woman beginning hormone therapy during the menopausal transition at like 48, 50, 52 years old. And that distinction eventually led researchers to ask an important question, and that is, does timing matter? Researchers began noticing that women who started hormone therapy closer to menopause often appeared to have different outcomes than women who started much earlier. And this eventually became known as the timing hypothesis. This is the idea that when hormone therapy is started may actually influence how the body responds, not because estrogen suddenly becomes good or bad, but because biology changes over time. And here's what I mean by that. As estrogen levels decline over years and decades, changes begin occurring throughout the body, including blood vessels, cholesterol metabolism, inflammation, vascular function, insulin sensitivity. And the body at age 50 may not be identical to the body at age 65, and that may definitely influence how therapies behave. So what did the WHI actually study? Well, this is one of the most misunderstood parts of this entire discussion because the study primarily looked at Premarin and Provera specifically. Those are not the same therapies that many providers prescribe today. Now, let's be clear, that also doesn't mean that Premarin and Provera don't work. They clearly do. Millions of women have definitely benefited from them. But it does mean that we need to be careful about applying findings from specific therapies to all hormone therapies. The key point here is that the WHI studied specific hormones, and the public often interpreted it as correlating to all hormones. And those are very different conclusions. One other important detail is that the WHI wasn't comparing identical groups of study participants. Women with a uterus received Premarin plus Provera, while women without a uterus received only Premarin. And when outcomes differed, researchers were left asking what caused those differences. Was it the progestin? Was it the hormone combination, timing, age, differences between patient populations? The honest answer is we still don't know with complete certainty. So what most people didn't realize then that we realize now is that the WHI didn't end the hormone conversation. It actually started a much bigger one. Now, let's talk about the question that most people really want answered. I know this was a big one for me, and that is, if I'm taking hormones, am I increasing my risk of breast cancer? The answer to that is more complicated than most headlines would suggest. The first thing to understand is that breast cancer risk is rarely determined by a single factor. Risk is influenced by all kinds of things like genetics, family history, obesity, alcohol smoking, physical activity, metabolic health, reproductive history, and many other factors. Hormones may be one piece of the puzzle, but they're rarely the entire puzzle. The second thing to understand is that hormone therapy is not one therapy. It's an entire category of therapies. Different hormones, different doses, different delivery methods, different patients, different risk profiles. So when we say hormone therapy, we're not talking about just one treatment. We're talking about an entire category of treatments. One thing that women never heard after the WHI study was that the estrogen-only arm and the estrogen plus progestin arm produced different findings. If all hormones behave identically, we'd expect identical outcomes, but we definitely didn't see that in the study. Long-term follow-up of the estrogen-only arm demonstrated lower breast cancer incidence and lower breast cancer mortality when compared with placebo. And that finding actually surprised many researchers because it challenged the simplistic narrative that estrogen causes breast cancer. Now, that doesn't mean that estrogen necessarily prevents breast cancer. And to be clear, that's not what I'm saying here. But it does illustrate how much nuance exists in this conversation and that there could be benefits that exist that we don't fully understand and that are worth further exploring. And it also highlights why researchers became increasingly interested in understanding whether different hormones, different formulations, and different delivery methods may produce different outcomes. And to the relief of many, this substantiates the fact that the hormone conversation should be guided by evidence and not fear. So this leads me into the topic of men, testosterone, and cancer fears in that arena. So to all of my male listeners out there, please tune in because you're also not immune to hormone fears either. The old fear was that testosterone automatically fueled prostate cancer, but current evidence does not support the idea that appropriately monitored testosterone therapy causes prostate cancer. Some observational data even suggest lower rates of aggressive prostate cancer among men using testosterone replacement therapy. But we do need to be careful here because it doesn't prove that testosterone actually prevents prostate cancer necessarily. What it does tell us, though, is that the relationship between testosterone and prostate cancer is far more nuanced than men were told for decades. And the simplistic narrative that testosterone causes prostate cancer is not nearly as clear-cut as many people once believed. And when it comes to estrogen, those conversations absolutely apply to men as well. In fact, as I mentioned a couple of episodes ago, many men become concerned about estrogen when starting testosterone replacement therapy because some testosterone does convert into estrogen. And years ago, many men were encouraged to aggressively suppress estrogen. But today, many specialists recognize that estrogen plays important roles in men too, including libido, erectile dysfunction, mood, cognition, cardiovascular health, and bone health. So for men, hormone optimization isn't just about testosterone, it's about hormone balance, and estrogen is part of that conversation too. So before we wrap up today's conversation, let's talk about something that often gets overlooked when discussing hormone therapy, and that's the delivery method. Because two people can be taking the exact same hormone and have very different experiences and outcomes. But why is that? Well, because the hormone itself isn't the only variable. How the hormone gets into the body matters too. And many people assume estrogen is estrogen or testosterone is testosterone, but that's not necessarily true when it comes to how the body processes these hormones, because the route of administration can influence absorption, metabolism, hormone levels, side effects, convenience, adherence, and potentially even risk profiles. Let's use estrogen as an example. Estrogen can be delivered via oral tablets, patches, creams, gels, sprays, and vaginal preparations. and those routes are definitely not identical. When a hormone is swallowed, it must first pass through the digestive system and then the liver before entering circulation. This process is called first pass metabolism, and it's one reason why oral hormone therapy may behave very differently than non-oral hormone therapy. For instance, a transdermal patch, cream, or gel largely bypasses the digestive tract and much of that first pass liver processing. The hormone enters through the skin and directly into circulation. This is one reason why many practitioners have become particularly interested in transdermal estrogen delivery, particularly for women who have cardiovascular concerns, clotting concerns, migraine history, or metabolic concerns. Again, that doesn't automatically make patches better, it simply just makes them different. Sometimes the discussion isn't about the hormone, it's about how the hormone gets into the body. Now let's talk about progesterone because the delivery route matters here as well. Progesterone can be delivered orally, vaginally, or topically, and each route comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. For example, many women find that oral micronized progesterone improves sleep. One reason is that progesterone is metabolized into compounds that have calming effects on the brain. That's one reason many women take oral progesterone before bedtime. That's definitely when I take it, and it definitely helps. But another woman may experience something completely different and respond completely different. And that's one of the recurring themes throughout this entire hormone conversation: individualization. The best hormone plan isn't the one that works for everyone, it's the one that works for you. And that brings me to testosterone. And this conversation applies to both men and women, because testosterone can be delivered via injections, creams, gels, patches, or pellets. And each option comes with trade-offs. Some people love injections. I'm personally one of them because they're often predictable, cost-effective, easy to monitor, and relatively easy to adjust. Plus, I only have to take mine once a week. My husband has to take his once every other week. Others dislike injectables because hormone levels can fluctuate between doses, so you may feel fantastic for a few days and then notice a decline as you approach your next injection. Some people actually prefer creams or gels. I'm personally not one of them, and I'll tell you why here in just a minute. But for those who do, they do because they allow for daily administration. Some people like that they can take something every day. Taking something every week or every other week, sometimes they forget about it and miss their doses. So for some people who like daily administration, this is a good option, and it can often provide a more steady hormone exposure, but it does require consistency. And there can be concerns about transferring the medication to another person through skin contact. So if you're putting it on at night and then you're snuggling with your hubby or your spouse, it can actually transfer to them as well. And the reason why I personally did not like the creams is because I started noticing application point hair growth. And I paid a lot of money for my laser hair removal. So I definitely did not enjoy that. I also felt like for me, the doses were less consistent because when you're administering them, the pumps don't actually pump the same amount every single time. So for me, I didn't really love that. But for other people, for the reasons I mentioned, they may like that. And then there are pellets. Pellets have become increasingly popular over the last decade. They're actually inserted under the skin, and then they gradually release hormones over several months. Many people love the convenience of that because there's no daily medication and there's no weekly injections or biweekly injections, and they don't have to remember their doses. But pellets also have drawbacks because once they're inserted, they're difficult to adjust the potency and the dosing. If the dose is too low, then you end up waiting until you take your next dose. But if the dose is too high, then you're also waiting. You're largely committed until the pellet gradually dissipates. That doesn't make pellets necessarily good or bad. It just simply means that they involve a different set of trade-offs. Every delivery method solves one problem and potentially creates another. And I love that statement because that actually applies to almost everything in medicine. There are very few perfect solutions, and most healthcare decisions often involve trade-offs. The key is understanding those trade-offs and finding the approach that best aligns with your goals, your preferences, your medical history, your risk factors, and your unique physiology. And that's exactly why modern hormone therapy has become increasingly individualized. Today, the conversation isn't simply, should I take hormones? The conversation is which hormone, at which dose, which formulation, which delivery method, and is it the right fit for me? The future of hormone therapy definitely isn't a one-size-fits-all. It's personalized medicine, which is why I'm such a huge proponent of functional medicine. So as we begin to wrap up today's episode, if there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this. Perhaps the biggest lesson from the WHI study isn't that hormones are dangerous, but that hormone therapy is far more individualized than we once thought. The question isn't really whether hormones carry risk. The question is whether we're evaluating those risks accurately. And that's where the science is today. Not in fear, not in certainty, not in headlines, but in thoughtful evaluation, individualized medicine, and through asking better questions. That said, please remember that everything shared on Serenity and Fire is meant for general information and inspiration purposes only. The topics we discuss are not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace personalized medical care. So please always consult with your healthcare provider regarding your individual health concerns, laboratory results, medications, and treatment decisions before trying anything we talk about on Serenity and Fire. Your health is unique and your care should be too. So as I bring today's episode to a close, if there's one theme that I think emerged throughout all of these hormone episodes, it's this. The future of healthcare isn't becoming simpler. It's becoming more personalized, more individualized. We're definitely moving away from a model where everyone receives the same recommendation and towards a model where treatment is increasingly tailored to the individual, to their biology, their genetics, their goals, their symptoms, their risks, and their unique physiology. Hormones have been one of the biggest examples of that shift, but they're certainly not the only one. Because over the last several years, another category of therapies that has exploded in popularity is peptides. If you spent any time in the wellness, longevity, biohacking, fitness, anti-aging, or hormone optimization communities, you've probably heard people talking about them. Some people are calling them the future of medicine, and others call them the future of performance enhancement, while others believe they're the next major breakthrough in longevity science. And some people believe that the entire industry has gotten completely out of control. So what's the truth? What exactly are peptides? How do they work? Why is everyone talking about them? What's science? What's hype? What's marketing? What's promising? What's concerning? And perhaps most importantly, are peptides really as revolutionary as some people claim? And that's where we're headed next, into everything there is to know about GLP-1s, growth hormone peptides, healing peptides, longevity peptides, cosmetic peptides, and performance-enhancing peptides, and more. And trust me, this topic is crazy fascinating, so definitely tune in next week as I dive into everything peptides, because if hormones taught us anything, it's that biology is rarely simple, and peptides may be the next chapter in that story. And that's a wrap for today. So as always, thank you so much for listening to Serenity and Fire. If today's episode inspired you, the best way to support the show is to follow, leave a review, and share these episodes with someone who might need to hear this information most. Until next time, protect your peace, lead with integrity, and keep balancing serenity with fire. I'm Krista Guagenti, and I'll talk with you more in our next episode. At Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique, we don't just offer traditional spa treatments. We create rituals that relax your mind, restore your health, and rejuvenate your spirit. From biohacking technologies to advanced oncology-trained care, everything we do is designed to help you heal on the deepest level with clean, holistic therapies, products, and amenities that are second to none. And right now, you can experience two of my favorites, our whole body LED light bed or hyperbaric oxygen therapies. And as a thank you for listening, you'll get 10% off your first session when you use the code Serenity10 at booking. What is your panacea? Let us help you find it, because true wellness isn't a quick fix, it's a ritual.